Welcome on behalf of the Library Subcommittee. It's great to see so many of you here. We are here to discuss Saurabh Mukherjea's latest book, Behold the Leviathan. It's a great pleasure to have Saurabh with us. I think I was speaking with you 2 weeks ago, and when I said that we should have him speak about this book and in general about the work he does and his insights, and I think you will have a presentation.
Yes.
Saurabh is unique for a couple of reasons. One is, as a fund manager, he has some particular insights which makes him, listening to him, learning for all of us, whether we are in this industry or participating as in our jobs or whatever the role might be. But also he's an extremely curious person, whether it's about sports, about society, about politics, about Mishti, like we were talking about just now, and brings those insights into investing and the governance and society. So I'm very, I read his book, the Behold the Leviathan, and I think it's particularly interesting to talk about what makes India work when he talks about the state power, the interplay of business, society, and our growth, the nature of that growth. And it will be great to hear him speak. He'll be speaking with our past president, Mr. Roopen Roy, who of course himself is very well regarded as an investor, as a thinker for business. He writes columns both on business and society. So it's a great privilege for us to listen to both of them. Thank you.
Okay, I'll kick off.
Okay, so I think let us make the presentation first.
Okay, fantastic.
And then we'll
Thank you so much, Rudro, and thank you to the library subcommittee for inviting me. I know Sunday afternoon is prime time, so very privileged that you guys have taken time out on a Sunday afternoon and not only come here, but also I've been treated to a wonderful cup of tea. I have to be honest though, one of the reasons I accepted is I've heard for many years that the asparagus roll here is fabulous, and I've never ever been able to have it. Because whatever programs my relatives organize here is usually dinner time. And dinner time there's a standard, very nice Bengal club dinner which you get, but doesn't feature the asparagus roll. So the reason I accepted and I had to incur the wrath of my better half by coming to Kolkata on Sunday was the sheer greed, this lust for the asparagus roll which brought me here. But in order to get there, I will take you through my latest book. So Behold the Leviathan was written over the course of 2022, 23, 24 as we were coming out of COVID, and we tried to share with you our insights on what's working in India but also what's not working, right? And naturally when the economy is doing well, as it was till a year ago, the pieces that were working were sort of more to the fore. And now as we get into a slightly trickier time for the economy, the bits that are not working come to the fore, but the underlying engine is actually the same thing, right? So I'll take you through the book reasonably quickly. So I'll take you up in the roller coaster ride. When I take you up, I hope it will feel exhilarating. But if you don't mind, I'll also bring you down a little bit, right? There will be a few stomach churning moments as I show you some of the things which are happening. And then I'll try to leave you with a solution. I won't just sort of leave you in the lurch, bringing you down. I'll leave you with a solution on what you and I can do to navigate through what's a privilege. It's a privilege to live here, but we also need to sort of think through how we navigate our way through the minefield, right? So let me start with the slide I use when I go to America, right? So when I go to America, I use this slide because I believe it's an interesting and provocative slide. So these are the world's large stock markets. These are the world's 10 largest stock markets. And what's intrigued me for many years, and one of the reasons I wrote the book was what's intrigued me for many years is amongst the major economies of the world, amongst the big economies of the world, there's only 2 countries which deliver double-digit dollar compounding over long periods of time. So in the columns of this table, you can see 30 years, 20 years, 10 years. Ignore TSR. TSR basically share market returns, right? It's a bit of jargon from my profession, right? There's only two markets which deliver double-digit dollar compounding over long periods of time, right? It's the two largest free market democracies in the world, right? And I've been intrigued by this ever since I was sort of 15, 20 years, ever since I was a student. I've been intrigued by why is this? America compounding wealth at a great rate is understandable. But how does India, against all odds, compound wealth at such a fabulous clip? Decade after decade after decade. It doesn't matter who's running the government. It doesn't matter what the state of the world economy is. India just pounds out these fabulous returns. In fact, if you look at that table over 20 years, India has even outdone America, right? And all of us know what's happened in this country over the last 20 years. So this is the sort of source of curiosity. I think Rudra was very kind to say that I'm a curious person, but who wouldn't be shown that table, right? If you look at that table, you see countries like China are nowhere compared to us in stock market compounding, right? Even the European countries are really not in the picture when it comes to wealth creation, right? And in fact, that table led me to a conclusion that one should always work in chaos. Countries like America and India are the definition of chaos, and holiday in peace, right? So holiday in places which are lower down that table. But a lot of people choose to do the reverse, and I've always been fascinated by that as well. They choose to holiday in chaos and live in peace, which is obviously not a very clever way to live your life. Anyway, what explains this? So I'll use a case study to simplify, right? I'll try to demystify for you why India works, both for the better and for the worse, right? And in the book, I've used Bangalore as a case study. So if you go to Bangalore today, their main tech hub is called Electronic City. So what is Electronic City today were rice fields till 1991. Right? There were rice fields till 1991. In 1991, Mr. Narayan Murthy took Infosys public, raised some money in the stock market in Bombay, and used that to buy 5 acres of land, 5 acres of paddy field in a village called Konappana Agrahara. Right? Complete sort of virgin village. Narayan Murthy does a stock market IPO, raises money and goes and buys that village that I've shown you on the top left. And he sets up Infosys' campus there. From that day in 91, when Mr. Murthy bought the land, to today, that piece of that area, Electronic City, the prices of land are up 300-fold, right? 20% per annum compounding, right? And it's evident that Mr. Murthy, his fellow founders at Infosys, the Infosys staff have done ever so well out of it, right? Mr. Murthy is a billionaire many times over. A typical Infosys employee would be a multi-millionaire, right? So the middle class, as through stock options, has done well. The promoter class, through building colossal businesses, globe-girdling empires, have done well. Right? Azim Premji, Nandan Nilekani, right? In Delhi, Shiv Nadar, right? They've done well. There's another constituency that has benefited, which is the landowners who sold the land to the tech parks that are in Bangalore. They haven't done as well as Mr. Murthy, but they've done reasonably well. They've managed to sell the land, right? So the winners are easy to spot. They're big and they're visible, and you can put dollar signs next to their wealth. But who are the losers, right? Who are the people who get thrown under the truck when this happens, right? It's important to understand that because it helps you understand when to pull money out of India, right? It's important to understand the losers. The first constituency that loses is the peasant, the landless farmer who tills the land. Most farmers in India today are landless farmers, right? The people who own the land in India are very different from people who till the land in India, right? So initially when I realized that the farmers who tilled the land were dislocated, I told my colleague Nandita, and I wrote the book, I told her it's not a problem, they will get a job in Hosur. Hosur is a industrial hub adjacent to Konappana Agrahara. But then we looked at the data, right? The entirety of South India, the whole of South India has just 5 million industrial jobs. The whole of South India has 5 million industrial jobs. Hosur has 1 million industrial jobs. So chances that a landless farmer will get a job in Hosur is actually quite low. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but the chances are quite low. So as we researched the subject, we realized that the farmers who got thrown out of their land here went further afield, either into Tamil Nadu or into Karnataka. The lives weren't wrecked, but they had to dislocate themselves They had to dislocate themselves from Konappan, Agrahar and move further into the countryside, right? So I would say they are net losers, but life continues because farming in India is not a disastrous profession to be in. But the even more intriguing losers are the chota, the small business people, right? The SMEs. So let's take an example of a Kirana store. So if you go to Electronic City today, it's called Electronic City, right? I've given you some pictures of the shopping district in Electronic City, right? So it's a modern shopping district, Carrot Lane, Titan, West Side, Star Bazaar, Reliance Retail, all the modern shops that you can imagine, right? If you go there, you will find very few Kirana stores. You'll find very few small shops, right? And we traced, one of our colleagues is a Kannadiga, through him we traced some of the original shopkeepers from that village. And they say as soon as a part of India becomes part of a suburban development, the small retailer gets wiped out. Because naturally a small retailer simply cannot compete against the efficiencies of a DMart or Amazon or Swiggy or Zomato or Blinkit, right? So what you have is very interesting. You have small micro enterprises. They are able to make a decent turn. They are able to make a decent profit margin when it's a village. But as soon as that area gets sucked into the broader urban economy, right, larger enterprises come and dislocate the smaller players, right? So just keep this mental model, right? I'm giving you a mental model of how Salt Lake has developed and Noida has developed and Hinjewadi in Pune has developed or Panvel in Bombay has developed. This is India's development story. Bangalore is a microcosm, right? At a macro level, it's very seductive because who doesn't like Bangalore? I love the city. Per capita income in Bangalore is double that of Bombay. Per capita income in Bangalore is double that of Bombay. Right? It's given India our tech ecosystem, now our venture capital ecosystem. But if you look at the underlying developmental story, the winners are few and they are big. And the losers are many. Right? So keep the mental model in mind as we look at India's profit distribution curve. Right? One of the beautiful things about the government of India is there's enormous amounts of free data available. Nobody uses it. So if you and I use it, it's great fun. And we can also make some money in the process. Right? So one of the best cuts of data the government of India gives is on profitability of companies across various size spectrums, right? What that data tells us is there are 1.5 million companies registered to pay corporate tax in India. 1.5 million companies registered to pay corporate tax. 1 million of them file a nil return. Nil return means they're saying we don't make any money. That number has doubled in the last 10 years. Right? So link it back to the Bangalore development model, right? The losers are many, right? And they're silent losers. The winners are that black line zipping through. That black line is India's most profitable companies. Roughly 70,000 companies in India make a profit of 1 crore or more, right? Just 70,000 companies in India make an annual profit. This is profit after tax of 1 crore or more. Their life is going from strength to strength, that black line. That black line is sloping upwards at 15-16%. That's tremendous. 70,000 companies with 1 crore or more of profits, basically profitable companies with 1 crore or more of profits, zipping through at 15, 16, 17%, which explains the prosperity of, if you don't mind my saying, our strata of society. Our strata of society is doing well, right? They're investing in the stock market, the kids are going to colleges abroad, they're holidaying around the world, they're buying high-end fashionable items, great. And that the spine of that is larger companies, crore or more of profit, doing ever so well. These 70,000 companies account for 98.4% of India's profit. Just imagine, basically the entirety of the country's profit is made by 70,000 companies. Now, if your company is one of them, then brilliant, 3 cheers. If your company is not one of them, then, little tough, right? Again, keep this in mind that 98% of India's profits now come from 70,000 companies. They're going from strength to the stock market, obviously. The stock market obviously includes these 70,000 companies and then some. Right, the private equity funded companies are obviously part of this. Even some of the venture capital backed companies are part of this. But the vast majority of the corporate ecosystem is not a part of this, right? And if you look at the black line is the point to be happy about. Look at the lower two lines, the blue line and the red line, right? The red line are companies with PAT, profit after tax, of 10 lakhs or less, basically just about getting by. Profit after tax of 10 lakhs or less, that line is barely moving. That line is barely moving. Profits there are barely moving. And remember, these are the fellows who make profits. 1 million make no profits, right? And remember further, these are companies registered to pay corporate tax. The pan ka shop outside, or the bidi wala outside, or the tea stall on Park Street is not registered. So imagine what's happening there, right? So what we are doing is we are consolidating economic power. We're consolidating economic power in the hands of well-run, smart, well-informed, tech-savvy companies, right? And this is how the free market operates. It's Darwinian. It's unapologetically Darwinian, right? So the last 10 years, where we've seen the UPI, Aadhaar, Jan Dhan, a good highway network come through, efficient logistics come through, right? GST come through. What this has done is created a pan-India, highly competitive playing field. As soon as you create unfettered, highly competitive playing fields, you polarize rewards in favor of the fittest, right? And therefore, those who are smart, well-capitalized, entrepreneurial, hardworking, they clean up that black line shooting upwards, and those who don't have those benefits and qualities, they fall behind, right? Now, whether you like what's happening in India or not depends on how you view this dilemma, right? Some people believe this is how it should be, this is free market economics, and they love it. Others have a more nuanced view, right? But there are, as we go through this story, there are specific facets of the story which I believe are incredibly interesting. So I've given you glimpses of this in the book. I'll quickly highlight 3 such facets, right? The first facet, and this is, I just feel endlessly interesting, is women are leaving Indian men far, far behind, right? The data is mind-blowing on this. First off, educational attainment data. Every year, the male-female gap, whether it's class 10 pass, class 12 pass, college graduation, postgraduate education, women are leaving Indian men in some other country. It almost feels as if men and women get educated in separate educational systems, right? Beyond a point, I can't fathom what's going on, because the divergence in educational outcomes is so vast between women and men. Even more interestingly, within the women data, women from less privileged backgrounds are zipping through faster than women from more privileged backgrounds, right? Very intriguing, again, hard to understand. Second aspect is, I've given plenty of examples of the second aspect of the book. The rise of UPI, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and this whole digital payment thing has been a huge boon for women. Right? Women's commerce has taken off, and whether it's setting up a beauty parlor or setting up a cake shop at home, or making salads or roti dal at home and selling it through the internet and getting paid via the India stack, it's become a ubiquitous form of business for women. Right? The result of that is the bottom left chart. Right? I'll quickly explain the bottom left chart. The RBI publishes lots of data on number of bank accounts, men versus women, and bank balances, men versus women. Right? What we are seeing is the number of bank accounts and the average balances are growing far faster for women than for men. Right? And even more intriguingly, if you look at the extreme left, I'm sorry, the chart font is probably a little small, but the extreme left bar is for rural India. So the advantage of women over men seems to be the sharpest in rural. Right? It's very counterintuitive. You would think that urban women, right? Urban women would be doing that much better than urban men. There is that, but the women pulling ahead of the men is sharpest in rural India. Right? And when I go there on research trips, you can see the galvanizing effect e-commerce, UPI, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar has had on women. And I think this is where you have to give some credit to the political leadership for sussing this out, that if you give women electronic money transfer and e-commerce so that they can sell their stuff on Insta or WhatsApp, it will completely change their economic fortunes, right? There's more such data. For example, the RBI publishes data on default rates by gender. Women's default rates on bank loans, is far lower than male default rates, right? And there's plenty more to be said on this subject, but by and large, the last 10 years, Indian women have left Indian men, especially in the less advantaged sections of society. Indian women have left Indian men far behind. The second very interesting aspect of India is the demise of basically my type of people, right? Overseas educated, IIT educated, IIM educated, this whole class is in decline, right? And what's coming through is the local graduate. The local graduate is now the preeminent force in corporate life, right? Elite education is increasingly a useless thing in corporate India, right? How do we know that? So what we did was we took the Nifty 50 companies, the 50 largest companies. We took all their board directors, easy to do, and we looked at the board directors' educational qualifications, right? So till a decade ago, going to IIT, IIM or overseas was a prerequisite for being on the board of almost a prerequisite for being on the board of a Nifty 50 company, right? So if you see those bars, right, you'll see till 2013, the IIT, IIM people were half of the board members of Nifty 50 companies, right? Just two sets of institutions. Come 2023, that's gone. For the first time in Indian history, the majority of the board members of large companies are no longer elite educated. They're just regular graduates, right? And my next book is actually on this subject, right? Basically, opportunity in corporate life has been democratized in a way it never was before, right? And it's very interesting. Why did it happen? What are the forces behind it? So I'm writing a book on that. Hopefully, early next year I'll be able to come and speak about that. But it's a complete dislocation of a established elite, right? A way of life, and indeed, say this form of speaking is on the decline, and a new leadership and a new class of people are rising to the forefront of India, right? The third dimension is South India. South India is the world's fastest growing region by a country mile, right? China is yesterday's news in that regard compared to South India. So let me just give you some quick stats. The southern 7 states account for a quarter of India's population, half the GDP, right, and 3/4 of the GDP growth. The southern 7 are 3/4 of the GDP growth. If you add to that Gujarat and Delhi, that's the entire country's economic growth. Nothing else in India really grows. Southern 7 grow their economy at around 7-8%, way ahead of China. States like Telangana double their GDP every 7 years. Right? The explosion of wealth in states like Telangana is to be seen, to be believed. Right? How Hyderabad has gone from being a second-tier town 10 years ago to a bubbling center of immense wealth. Just immense wealth, right? Because my job is to pitch to rich people and convince them to invest with me. I've seen trips to Hyderabad change dramatically over the last decade as that state has gone from strength to strength. But even Tamil Nadu, even though Tamil Nadu's had some indifferent governance, Tamil Nadu remains a rock solid industrial compounding machine. Ditto for Karnataka, Andhra under the new leadership, hopefully. Andhra went through a bit of an up and down. Kerala on per capita income is already a second world country. And actually feels like that. When you go to Kerala, its per capita income is like that of a second world country. Its social indicators are like that of a second world country. And it feels like a second world country. Kerala remittances have played a role. Goa again, stellar growth, and per capita income is like a second world country. So southern 7 have pulled away dramatically from the rest of India. Their murder rates, their crime rates are less than half of the rest of India. Right, their infrastructure, their healthcare systems, their educational systems, far superior to what the rest of the country can claim. This is on publicly available data, right? It's easy to see this, right? So 3 dimensions. There are women pulling ahead of men, a new educated elite coming through, very distinct from the previous IIT, IIM overseas educated elite, and South India roaring through, right? So these are the sort of different dimensions to the ascent of modern India. So what's the problem? The problem is this. Corporate profitability growth in India over the last 7 quarters is basically coming towards zero. Right? The country is struggling to grow corporate profitability. Why is it struggling to grow corporate profits? Right? If you speak to most CEOs, promoters, speak to the government, everybody is perplexed. They're worried. They're trying to figure out what on earth should we be doing. Right? Now let's go back to what I began with. Right? I showed you that vast majority of companies don't make any money. The vast majority of companies in India don't make any money. 90% of Indians work in companies with less than 20 employees. 90% of Indians work in companies with less than 20 employees. If those companies are not doing well, Will they hire more people? I don't think so, right? So that's the first challenge on employment, right? The vast majority of companies, small scale industries, simply don't make enough money to be able to hire lots of people. Secondly, in industries such as mine, financial services or IT services or media, technology, automation, AI is coming and taking jobs away. So for example, even in our research team now, we make heavy use of AI. It's cheap, it's very effective, and it's far easier to use AI than to train a 21-year-old to do our job. We are a small company. You must have heard TCS lay off 12,000 people. Quietly, larger banks, larger IT companies are laying off tens of thousands more. The data suggests, and the data is pretty accurate on this, I reckon, in the last 5 years, employment creation in India is zero. The previous 15 years was growing, jobs in India were growing at 11%. So if you look at jobs data, 2008 to 2020, job creation was growing at 11% per annum, which means that every 6 years, number of jobs was doubling. Since 2022 now, job creation growth has been zero, right? At the elite end, at the tech, banking, media end, technology is the culprit, and at the low end, at the labor-intensive, small-scale end, the lack of profitability is the culprit. Now, if you can't create jobs, will you have consumption growth? Unlikely. And if you can't grow consumption, consumption is 60% of the economy. If you can't grow consumption, will you grow profits? Unlikely, right? So we face a challenge here. The people who run the country are awake and alive to this, which is why the PM highlighted the potential GST cuts, which the government will try to expedite in the next 3 months. Let's hope it gets done, because we desperately need those GST cuts to give consumption a leg up. But that's going to be a band-aid, right? There's a bigger rethink required, hence the next book. There's a bigger rethink required on how does India create jobs. By the way, China is having the same problem. China, one in 3 youth in China has no jobs, right? Even in the Western world, where there's hardly any university graduates, the few university graduates who are there are struggling to get jobs, even in America or Europe, because AI is so disruptive. It's cost so much less. It costs so much less to use AI rather than a young graduate, right? Now, what should we do, right? Should we just sit here and consign ourselves to our fate? No, we shouldn't. Because let's go back to the chart again, right? What the chart is showing us, that chart I began with, what it's showing us is there are 2 markets in the world which compound your and my wealth in dollar double digits. One is ours and the other is the United States of America, right? And through a bunch of related economic developments, our country, our government has made it tax-free for us to invest abroad, right? You and I can now invest abroad tax-free at very low cost into the American market, right? And if we do that, we're able to diversify, right? So India and America are not only the 2 best performing markets in the world, these are 2 very different political systems. Theirs is a presidential system, ours is a parliamentary system. Our financial systems are also very different. Their system is stock market and bond market dominated. Ours is still a banking dominated financial system. Our political systems are different. As a result, the 2 countries go up and down in different waves, right? So in finance, we call it low correlation, right? Low correlation means 2 markets have very little to do with each other. In 1956, a man in Chicago called Harry Markowitz wrote a paper for which he got the Nobel Prize in 1990. I read that paper when I was in college in 95. It took me 10 years to understand that paper. When I understood that paper, my life changed, right? I'll quickly summarize that paper for you because it has enormous ramifications for your and my future. What Markowitz said, I'm just paraphrasing Markowitz in the context of this discussion. He said, if you can find two markets which have very little to do with each other, example, India and America, if you put half your money in each market, so if you put half your money in America, remember America has done 13% over the last decade, right, over here. America has done 13%, that final column, right? India has done 10%. If you put half your money in either country, you will not get the mathematical average. That's what instinctively you feel that if America is doing 13, India is doing 10, I'll get 11 and a half, right? You won't get the average. Markowitz said you'll get the higher of the 2 markets, right? That's the first Markowitz axiom, right? You diversify across 2 markets with low correlation, you get the higher return of the 2 markets. Secondly, he said, you'll get the lower risk of the 2 markets, right? And since your return is higher and your risk is lower, return divided by risk goes up, and that's called the free lunch in finance, right? So Bengalis are not the only people who think in food metaphors, right? Other people also do. So that's called the free lunch in finance. Your return goes up, your risk comes down. And the third thing, and I think this is genuinely mind-blowing, that man deserved his Nobel Prize exactly for this. So he said, ex ante, which means before the event, you and I don't have to second guess. We don't have to second guess who will do better over the next decade. Will America do better? Will India do better? You don't have to second guess. Do 50-50 and then every year come back to 50-50. If you do that, whichever country does better over the next decade, you'll get that return, you'll get the lower risk, and thus you'll get the free lunch in finance, right? Now, till 2 years ago, Markowitz existed and his theorems existed. Till 2 years ago, this was an academic discussion, because till 2 years ago, if you'd invested abroad, if you were brave enough, like I was, to invest abroad, the government of India would say, thank you very much, sir, for investing abroad. I will have 20% of that long-term capital gains for myself and 42% of the short-term capital gains for myself, right? And in case something happened to you, the American government would take 45% as estate duty. So unless you were mad like I am, you wouldn't be investing abroad till 2 years ago. But in the last couple of years, a range of legislative changes mean the long-term capital gains tax for investing abroad is the same as it is in India. The short-term capital gains tax basically can be neutralized through a variety of straightforward means, right? And you and I can now invest abroad basically at almost the same tax treatment that we get locally. And in fact, the costs of investing abroad in many senses is actually lower than the cost of investing in the Bombay Stock Exchange, right? Now, if that avenue has been opened, right, what should you and I do? Right? So 3 years ago, once I realized that this potential existed, I called up my clients abroad. So we manage money abroad for 3 institutions in the West. So for example, the Vatican, a college in Oxford University, a pension plan in Canada, and so on. I called them up in early 2022 and I requested them to put me in touch with their fund managers in London and New York. Right? And I spent 4 months learning from them what can they do there which we can't do here. Right? Because that's the whole point of diversification. You want to invest in things there which you can't invest in back home, right? And I realized there are 3 things they can do that we can't yet do. One day we'll do it, but we can't yet. Quickly, just 1, 2, 3. The first is, just use the Mahabharata as an analogy. So they go into Kurukshetra, they don't worry about who are the Kauravas or the Pandavas, right? We in India perpetually exercised. Asian Paints or Birla, HDFC or ICICI, TCS or Infosys. Their point is, who cares? Just find the fellow who's selling Gada and Talwar to both the Kauravas and the Pandavas, right? Why do you want to predict who will win the war, right? Find the neutral arms dealer who can sell to both sides. So for example, every single phone in this room plus this laptop, the semiconductors, the chips inside it have circuits hammered into it. That's called lithography. The hammering of circuits onto a chip is called lithography. 92% of the lithography in the world comes from a remarkable Dutch company called ASML. Their employee headcount is 1/10 that of Reliance Industries Limited. The company is worth 1/3 more than Reliance Industries Limited, right? It's a unique Dutch company. There's a lovely book on it if you want to read more about it. Remarkable company, singular company. There's nothing like it in the world. The book is called Chip War. The book is called Chip War by Sam Miller. It's a Financial Times Book of the Year award book. Terrific read, right? So it's a classic neutral arms dealer. Tonight the flight I will take back to Bombay, the seat belts will be made by Transdyne. 95% of the airline seat belts in the world are made by Transdyne. Right? They are the neutral arms dealer of seat belts. They don't care whether I fly Air India or Indigo or British Airways. They will make money regardless. Right? That's the first thing the West has. We don't yet have it. The second thing they have is what they call invisible utilities. Right? The world's largest invisible utility is Microsoft. Right? We are using Microsoft software for this presentation. Microsoft makes $120 billion of revenue selling software to all of us. Satya Nadella, clever man, he realized that they can make another 120 billion of hardware, cloud, right, through the same sales force. So they now make $240 billion of revenue. On that, their profit margin is a mere 47%. They make $80 billion of cash every year. Do they use that for Bill Gates' daughter's wedding? No, they don't, right? They use it to invest in the things you will use 10 years hence. So they've done some thinking. What will you use 10 years hence? They have decided you will use AI, you will use gaming, and you will use virtual reality, right? The Zoom calls or the WhatsApp calls of the future will be 3D phone calls, right? So every year they are investing $50 to $60 billion securing those technologies of the future. They've done this for 50 years, have one monopoly, use that to build another monopoly. Microsoft alone is bigger than the Indian economy. Microsoft alone is bigger than the Indian stock market. Grows faster than the Indian stock market, for obvious reasons, grows smoother, right? So that's the second type of utility. There are many such invisible utilities which are part of our day-to-day life, but we don't see this. I'll quickly give you one more. Bellevue Hospital, Apollo Hospital, pretty much every hospital in Kolkata, the soft tissue surgeries now are done by robots, right? The surgeon is present there, but the surgeon doesn't do it, the robot does it. 90% of the world's soft tissue surgery is done by one robot called Da Vinci. Right? It's owned by a company in San Francisco called Intuitive Surgical, right? Classic utility, right? The third thing that the West has, we don't yet have, one day we'll have, is ultra luxury companies, right? Ultra luxury companies cater to dollar billionaires. Dollar billionaires have one simple problem in life. They want to tell other people, look at me, look at how rich and successful I am, but then they hesitate because it feels vulgar, right? They can't quite make up their mind, right? Should we tell or should we not tell? So after the Second World War, the French and the Italians figured out this problem. And they said, we will solve it. How will we solve it? We will create a range of products whose purchase will connote power and wealth. Right? You don't have to say it out loud, you just buy that. So the godfather of this industry is that company called Hermes. Right? It's owned by the Dumas family in Paris. They are the pioneers of this. So 100 years ago, the Dumas family made 3 pivotal decisions which created this colossal industry. The first call the Dumas family took was they said we will only make ladies' leather handbags. We won't do anything else. Just ladies' leather handbags. And even within that, 2 models, one called Birkin, the other called Kelly. Right? The second call they took was the entry-level pricing will be deliberately crazy, obscene. So the entry-level pricing today is $50,000 is the cheapest Birkin bag. Right? And the third call they took was that given that the number of dollar billionaires grows at 7% every year, they said we will cap production growth at 5%. We will deliberately create scarcity. So Birkin bags or Kelly bags are now only available by invitation. Right? And my research suggests to get an invite, a lady has to fulfill 2 criteria. She has to live in the right part of town. So I presume in Kolkata that's Alipur, I guess. Right? And secondly, she has to be a high profile socialite. Right? Other people are not invited. As a result, from what I've seen, most women are willing to sell their husband's kidney to get these bags. Right? Because if you get this bag, it's an immediate passport to global status. Right? These bags are impossible to get. Now, there's only 2 Hermes stores in India, by the way. One in Kala Ghoda, Bombay, and the other in Chanakyapuri, Delhi. Right? They won't be opening anymore. Right? The whole policy is less. Just this policy of as few bags as possible means that for 100 years this company has grown profits at 17%. This is a passport to global superstar status, 70% profit growth, production growth 5%. Market cap $250 billion. The most valuable luxury goods company in the world. This is a template for wealth. Other people have copied it, but not in handbags. So IDEX is for dogs and cats. IDEX is for dogs and cats, but Hermes is for rich ladies, right? I won't go into the IDEX details today, but IDEX is the same thing for dogs and cats, right? There's another, the equivalent for second-hand cars is a company called Copart, right? Second-hand cars also are a fetish for many people, old cars. Copart monetizes that. So that's the third area of wealth that the West monetizes. So neutral arms dealers, utility companies, invisible utilities, and ultra luxury. The West is able to do this because they've been at it for the last 100 years. We will get there one day, but until such time, we can sit in India and invest into this ecosystem, effectively tax-free, actually at very low cost, courtesy the reforms expedited by the government of India. In January this year, the new RBI governor took another pivotal step. And I love it when these things are done but not sort of discussed in the public media because it gives me something to do. This January, the RBI governor said, anybody resident in India can open foreign currency bank accounts in Gift City. Which means, once you compound your wealth in these companies, you can redeem and keep your wealth in dollars in Gift City and use it, as I'm going to do, to pay my son's college fees in the UK. I don't have to bring the money back to India, break rupees into pound or dollars, take it out again. The government of India has made it very easy. The RBI has made it very easy for us to have foreign currency bank accounts with full nominee structure and all of that in GIFT City. It's user friendly, it's transformational for people like me. Basically, my son's education, more than half of it is paid for by these guys. I only put up a little bit of the money. Now, I did it 3 years ago. Had I done it when he was 7, I did the math. If I had done this when he was 7, I wish I had done it when he was 7, I would have only had to pay $50,000 for an Ivy League education. But anyway, when he was 7, I wasn't smart enough to do it. But many of you are in a fortunate position. There are some youngsters in the room. Do this, it will change your life, right? Because the government has made it very easy for you to diversify globally at very low cost. So the unusual rise of modern India means we will make money in India, but we need to be smart enough to realize we will make money elsewhere in the world as well. And the two big places for making money remain the two most chaotic nations on the face of this planet. Right? America is chaotic because we sit here and look at them. I would submit to you, India is equally chaotic, but both countries are equally productive in creating colossal wealth over the next 10, 20 years. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurabh.
Thank you, Saurabh. It was an excellent presentation. So before I get into, and I think we have come here on a rainy afternoon.
Yes, sir.
To get some actionable wisdom from you as well.
Okay.
So I will try to pry out some of those through my questions. The first is a flippant question, and that is you have named the book Behold the Leviathan.
Yes, sir.
Now, Leviathan in the Hebrew Bible is a monster, a sea snake, which comes out of the sea and is finally slain.
Yeah.
So, have you used the metaphor in a limited context that it's a huge monster which is coming up unusually and unexpectedly, or are we going to be slain?
Right. So incredibly perceptive question. Let me answer it in the least damaging way possible. I don't own copyright on the word Leviathan. An English philosopher, I think he's English philosopher called Thomas Hobbes,
Yes.
was the first guy to use it 400 years ago. And Hobbes used this biblical term. Roopen is absolutely right. It's a biblical term. Hobbes used it to refer to the government. He was the first person to refer to the government as the Leviathan. And Hobbes meant it as a double-edged compliment, that the Leviathan can be a source of immense power, strength, but it can also be very destructive. And I meant the use of the word Leviathan in that context. And I deliberately made it somewhat hard to understand so that the relevant people who need to understand it would understand it, and whoever didn't need to understand it wouldn't understand it. I think the job has been broadly achieved by the use of the term.
I'll leave it at that. You have given a very good example, and you've taken the example of Kurukshetra, where you don't care whether you're on the Pandava side or the Kaurava side, as long as you are a arms dealer. Now, a similar concept you have very much aware, ASML is part of that, is that AI is becoming a very dominant theme in all the discourses of investment.
Yes, sir.
And the other metaphor that you keep hearing is that of the gold rush. This digital gold rush, during the gold rush, the people who made the money, regardless of whether you found the gold or not, was the fellow who created the picks and shovels.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes.
So, if you look at NVIDIA, which makes chips, which is powering all these large data centers and AI engines, they have quadrupled their value in the last couple of years. So, if the audience here or we want to make money from this new phenomenon which is going to transform the world, which is artificial intelligence, what kind of companies should we look for? I'm not asking you to name companies.
Sure.
You know the 9 companies which are $1 trillion, but which kind of companies are the picks and shovels of the new era?
Absolutely. So just on that point, on the Kurukshetra wala point, there's two ways to understand that, right? One is to say we don't care who wins, whether the Kauravas or Pandavas. I see it as slightly different. I see it as my not being able to predict, right? I care who wins. I would want the Pandavas to win, but ex ante, very difficult for me to predict who the Pandavas are and who the Kauravas are, right? So I've done this for 20 years. I've realized there are limits to our knowledge. And therefore, whenever it's a Kaurava versus Pandava situation, I'm trying to train myself to say, don't get into betting who will win the war, right? Try to find out who the neutral arms dealer is. Not that I don't care, but there are limits to my forecasting ability, right? Now coming to the picks and shovels piece, right? When I travel around India, right, or say I'm in the lift of my building, the flippant remark I often get is, boss, America is in trouble, Trump is doing that, Trump is doing this. Right? A lot of the commentary, both in the press, in the media, and in day-to-day life, is ignorant of the facts I would submit to you on the subject. The facts are shown here. That blue line is America's share of corporate profits. Right? Blue line is America's share of corporate profits. Till around 2017, that blue line was stable at 30%. It had been stable at 30% for nearly 3 decades. America's share of corporate profits had been stagnant at 30% for 3 decades. America is 70% of the world's market cap. It was 30% of the world's profits. Then, as Roopen is alluding to, AI arrives, social media arrives, YouTube arrives, Netflix arrives, Google arrives. And in the last 8 years, America's share of global profits is rocketing. Right? It's gone to 40% in 7 years. Just to give you a sense of how dominant America is, so 15th August, India celebrated 79 years of independence, right? And I did the math that in the history of independent India, in a given calendar year, only 2 companies ever have done $10 billion or more of sales. In the history of independent India, only 2 companies, domestic companies, have done $10 billion more of sales. One is Maruti Suzuki, understandable. And the only other company is Apple, right? So the rise of American technology, the rise of AI is creating a gold rush. This will continue for some time because it's going to be very difficult for us to match their AI, right? AI needs vast amounts of money, processing power, which they own, NVIDIA is owned by them. So the question for us was, when we built this global business out, was how do we monetize this without buying NVIDIA? So we realized there are many other smaller companies which are doing AI in more niche areas, right? So there's a company I told you about, IDEX. IDEX has compounded 300x in the last 30 years by looking after the dogs and cats of the rich through the use of AI, right? So IDEX basically does diagnostics for the dogs and cats of the rich, then provides the veterinary care, then provides the medicines, then provides you an app in your hand which tells you your dog's weight, blood pressure, health, medicines over the last 20 years. And now, courtesy AI, IDEX's app predicts that next year your dog is likely to get arthritis. This is the preemptive care you need to begin for your dog, right? An IDEX dog lives till the age of 24, right? You can imagine, right, that extra 9 years, the dog keeps falling sick, and IDEX monetizes this, right? Monetizes this. So the way we are trying to make money from AI is, rather than doing what everybody else is doing, running after NVIDIA, right? It's an outstanding company, but it's hard for me to know how long that single party lasts. We are saying there are many more niche use cases of AI which can be monetized. Let's go and grab those, especially if those are use cases, smaller companies that nobody else is looking at, IDEX being a case in point. But I completely agree with Roopen. Gold rush, time for us to figure out how to make money from this new, blazing new technology, which is going to change our lives pretty profoundly.
So I'll just tell you a small anecdote and then ask you something and then ask a follow-up question. You know, in 2008, when the Harvard Business School had its 100 years, Bill Gates, who was a dropout, came back and he was given his degree. And he said, "Dad, I have come back. I told you I'll someday come back and pick up my degree, and I have come back." So he made an excellent speech on that occasion, where he said that capitalism is broke in some sense because male baldness is a universal problem. There are bald males all over the world. But malaria is a very third world problem. So therefore, there will be a lot of research dollars going after male baldness, but not after malaria. So there is a misallocation of research. So my question is, could you explain to the audience the last chapter of your book where you very interestingly talked about India Stack 2?
Sure.
And my question would be, if India Stack 2 is very India focused, trying to solve problems of India which do not bother the Western world, who is going to fund that?
Sure. So Roopen is flagging the epilogue of the book, which is basically based on a 3-hour discussion I had with Nandan Nilekani in his office in Bangalore. He explained to me how many of the problems which bedevil our country can be, if not solved, remediated to a considerable extent by AI. So, for example, he gave the example of, say, a 16-year-old Naga girl in Nagaland. She wants to study science in 11, 12, followed by engineering. Right? At the moment, she has no way of knowing that Infosys has a scholarship for bright young 16-year-olds to go to the Indian Institute of Science, right? And there's an entrance exam for the Infosys scholarship, and if she gets that, her life is sorted, right? So what Nandan said is, we need to create a AI platform where across the country, whether you're looking for an internship, you're looking for a job, you're looking for a scholarship, you're looking for a grant, you should be able to enter your needs and your credentials, that I'm class 10 pass. The AI platform will validate that indeed you've passed class 10. It'll log in your request and it'll match you with an employer who says, I'm willing to bankroll your education. In return, you have to work for me 3 years after college, or indeed the Infosys scholarship. So he says we need a platform which matches seekers and providers, right? Similarly, say a farmer. There are hundreds of programs which farmers can seek aid from, seek fertilizer from, seek knowledge from, seek input from, but there isn't a central base. And as you know, we have 25 languages in the country. So if we could have an AI platform where a Tamil farmer would speak into his phone saying, I am growing barley in Tamil Nadu in the month of September. I need working capital, I need money to grow this crop. What are the government programs available to me? And AI will chug out the government programs, and he can then choose which government program he wants to apply for, right? We don't have this. Now, these are not trivial builds. You need training data for the farmer in Tamil, for barley, then you need it for the farmer in Bangla, in rice, in Punjabi, in lady's finger, and so on. So you need thousands of training data cases to be trained into the AI. Similarly for the scholarship piece, I'm making it sound simple, but somebody in India is going to bankroll this, and whoever bankrolls it will, I think, will put his name in the books of history as someone who brings the benefits of AI to the masses, to the problems which really bedevil our country. So Roopen is absolutely right. For writing PowerPoint presentations, there's already ChatGPT. I don't think you and I need to create AI for PowerPoint presentations, but somebody out there will put their brains and their money behind creating AI for scholarships, for farm relief, for medical care, right? Imagine an AI which tells a farmer in the middle of the Sundarbans that this is how you can do the basic level treatment for measles, and here's the 3 hospitals that you should take your child or your spouse to. But before you go there, this is the emergency care you need to provide to the patient for measles, right? Those sorts of AI interventions, and it's interesting, right? Even America hasn't come up with those AI interventions. As Roopen is alluding, I don't think they will. This is where we can take a lead, but we need philanthropists and coders and trainers, bot trainers, who are willing to put the best years of their career in building these bots.
Coming back to a little more on the ground, and this must be of interest to the audience. Even the richest guy has his own risk appetite, right? And you invest according to your risk appetite. How would you react if I say that a slice, I know your views, but still I'm asking you, what if people put some slices of money in real estate, A, not and, or B, gold?
Sure. So the real estate one is reasonably easy to answer. So my gripe against real estate is not that it gives returns broadly the same as inflation. I belong to a family of lawyers, right? Both my dadus were lawyers in Kolkata, And I looked up, I Googled 10 years ago that out of the cases in India's legal system, something like 60% pertain to land disputes, right? So some 60 lakh cases, some 60 lakh files are gathering dust in India's courts on real estate disputes, right? And I realized I don't want to be, I don't have the heart in myself to be one of those 60 lakhs. I also did some further Googling and realized out of every 100 murders that are committed in India, some 25 are for land and real estate, right? So I said that's even worse, right? It's one thing to be ensnared in the legal system, it's even worse to get killed. So I said I have no interest in any of this. So unless somebody in my family decides to become a politician, I don't have any interest in 7, 8 or 9% return. And I've seen many relatives go through this cycle. They buy something with high hopes because somebody else has told them, Rajarhat, that's a done deal. If you buy in Rajarhat, in 3 years you double your money. Did you not know? Right? And either a Kaka, Jatha, Mama, Kakima will do this. And 30 years later, more likely than not, their kids will be living in Seattle. And I'll be the person selling their plot, haggling with somebody for black, white, right? It's just hopeless. I did it for my parents. They live in England. My mom and dad bought a flat in what is now a flourishing suburb of Delhi in 1980. I sold it in 2023. 7% CAGR across those 42 years is what those two hardworking people got. 7% CAGR is 2% above the rate of inflation. Thankfully, I didn't have to get into a legal dispute or put my life and limb at risk. But there was a very difficult discussion on the color of money, which I had to navigate. So yes, it's simply not worth the hassle. Plus 20%. After all of that, 20% long-term capital gains tax.
Answer is no.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's good for entertainment. I mean, you just want to make your life miserable, by all means, buy real estate.
The second thing is, what about gold ETFs or gold sovereign bonds?
Yeah, so the troika of assets which gives you the bulletproof portfolio really is America, India, and gold, right? There's plenty of maths to show that. That's your bulletproof portfolio. A third really sorts you out for life. The only challenge is at this juncture, gold is expensive, I think, and hence diversify in gold, but I don't think today is the best juncture. Today is a great time to diversify from India into America because India is expensive, especially Indian small and mid cap is eye-wateringly expensive. An American small and mid cap is trading at 26-year lows in terms of discounts to things like Nvidia. So diversify, but diversify from things which are expensive to things which are cheaper, right? Gold will be cheap one day, right? I think once this Trump mania reduces a bit, gold will be cheaper. That'll be a great juncture to diversify into gold ETFs.
I want to do a quick dipstick test. How many of this audience you have got money invested in the US market? 2, 3. So small number. Now I want to make a small confession that I am seized with insanity from time to time.
Right, sir.
And
all of us.
3 years ago, when I was talking to my son, I thought that Nvidia will be a huge company. So I invested half my portfolio in Nvidia. So my US portfolio is doing far better than my Indian portfolio. So it is important if you would explain if anybody here wants to easily invest in US assets, how do they do that?
Sure. So the seductive route, but taxed harshly, is you open one of these many brokers. Almost all the brokerages offer you access to the American market. The challenge is if you do that, you'll pay 42% short-term capital gains tax here and 45% estate duty over there if something happens to you, right? So as my wife put it, when you're alive, you'll get taxed here. When you're dead, you'll get taxed there, right? So it's very seductive because it's very easy to do. You can sit here and start investing in America right away from your Indian brokerage account. But from a tax perspective, it's a disaster, right? What we did was slightly different. We opened a fund in GIFT City in Gujarat. We put a team there, and then I hired one of the big four, and I spent 3 months figuring out how to run a fund without having to pay capital gains taxes on buying and selling. And we figured out through a little bit of work that if I have a fund in GIFT City and a fund in Cayman Islands, My gift fund invests into my Cayman fund. Cayman Islands neither has capital gains tax nor has inheritance tax. So I am able to invest tax-free into the Western world. All I have to do is go via Cayman Islands. To be fair, it's a relatively investor-friendly jurisdiction. It's not very expensive. So that's how we created Roopen. That's how we created, for the first time in Indian history, an ability to invest abroad without having to pay taxes on every buy or sell trade. The more normal route of opening a brokerage account and buying and selling leads to brutal tax incidents, which we wanted to avoid. And credit to the government. We went and explained it to them. They understood it and they said, go ahead. And as I said, this year in January, the RBI then said you can open dollar bank accounts, which means if you want your money back, I can give you your money back in Kolkata, but better still, I can put the money in your gift bank account, where you can keep it in dollars and spend it on holidays or education or a flat in London, whatever takes your fancy, right? So this is where India excels, right? You understand the problem, you go to the powers that be. I couldn't do this in the UK. I lived in the UK for 18 years, right? I used to work for the regulator for some of that. You go to the regulator and say, do ABC, they'll say, well, let's put a committee together. Let's deliberate this for the next year, whether this is a good idea. Here you figure out a problem, you figure out a solution, you go to the powers that be and say, this is good for the country. They'll obviously weigh your solution up, right? And if it makes sense to them, sometimes as little as 48 hours, the solution will be put to the public as a consultation paper, right? Sometimes they'll just take the email, copy paste it, and that's the consultation paper. There'll be 60-day consultation, and then it'll become the law of the land, right? That's where India excels. It's done behind the scenes. Where India struggles is, if you go and say, let's solve global hunger, then obviously the people say, well, what do we do? And there'll be a debate for the next 20 years. So our democracy has its strengths. On practical problems, this country excels in problem solving.
I'll ask the last question and then I'll open it to the audience. When, let's say, an Indian firm or an Indian money manager opens an account in wherever, Cayman Islands, Singapore, any other jurisdiction, Dubai, and invests, who does the stock picking? Would the Indian company, which has very little knowledge about the US market, do the stock picking, or would you outsource it to a expert group?
So there's a tax answer, there's a investment answer. From a tax perspective, we can't. If the fund is in Cayman Islands and I'm doing the stock picking here, then people will come knocking on my door saying it's called POEM, Place of Effective Management, right? So you can't. If you have a fund in Cayman, you have to have the fund manager outside India from a tax perspective. So in our case, our fund manager is in New York. The second is, as I think Roopen is alluding to, from a practical perspective, we need a team of analysts running around Europe and America, doing the research. Till 3-4 years ago, it was difficult to persuade people who have careers in Wall Street to do that for an Indian firm. But as I discovered 3 years ago, it's become very doable. We are now able to persuade global talent to manage Indian money, run around India, Europe and America for us, talk to our clients over here, and manage the money from New York. So the money is being managed from outside, it has to be, but also the research is being done by often people of Indian descent, sometimes Indian passport holders, but people who worked in America for a decade or more. They run around Europe and America. It's easy to do so. In the context of our economy, actually, it's not that expensive. In fact, you'll be surprised to hear, right? And this is why I worry about the country. So staying in a 3-star hotel in Europe or America is far cheaper than staying in a 3-star hotel in Bombay or Kolkata. Far cheaper. I mean, it's orders of magnitude cheaper. So my parents live in a town called Canterbury in England. So often when I go there, I stay in a local hotel near their house. It's called Premier Inn. It's 4,000 rupees a night plus breakfast. Right? I don't think in Kolkata I'll get anything sensible for 4,000 rupees a night plus breakfast. No chance. Right? And that's why actually it's easier to do research abroad than it is in India. You might be seeing plenty of Indians now go to holiday in Thailand or Vietnam because it's cheaper to holiday in Thailand or Vietnam than to holiday in Goa.
From the floor. Questions? Yes, Gautam.
Yeah. Just a few things about Japan. I mean, Japan
Sure.
is a zero growth country for last. Japan is a zero growth country for last so many years,
Yeah.
and yet it's an economic powerhouse. And one of the top listed countries.
Yeah, so it's a good point you make, right? So Japan is a zero growth country, and you can see it's had a bearing on the returns, right? So Japan has compounded at around 6-7% dollar terms, meaningfully behind America. So obviously, as a society, they are incredible, right? It's probably one of the most advanced societies, at least I've ever visited. Their challenge is they're falling behind on two fronts, right? They're obviously falling behind on AI to America, but on robotization and factory automation, China has moved to a scale that makes Japan or Europe look antiquated, right? So BYD's cars, for example, have gone to a different league compared to, say, Toyota's cars, right? In music, they lost their edge when Apple became the hegemon, but in auto as well, they seem to be on the cusp of losing their edge. It's a very cheap market. It's incredibly seductive. The valuations look very cheap, but the growth rates, as you're rightly saying, the earnings growth rates, profit growth rates are simply not there for me to believe that I can make around 13-14% dollar compounding by investing there. So love visiting the country, but it's difficult for us to convince ourselves to invest there, sir.
Two questions. One. Yeah, thanks. Two questions. One is Taiwan as an addition to Troika, because TSR 20 and TSR 10 seems to be pretty high. And second is this bit about MSMEs being a growth vector and the whole Atmanirbharta piece. Sure. The way to break out of that 70K issue is to look at MSMEs. So how do you see that play?
Sure. So Taiwan is part of our portfolio. So Taiwan is double-digit compounder here. Taiwan has basically one giant company, TSMC. TSMC, I would submit to you, is part of the American economic complex, chip complex, and hence we are happily invested in it. All of us here are using TSMC chips, right? On the MSME piece, one very interesting bit of data, I sort of jumped over it in the interest of speed, but what the Government of India data shows is that in that 70,000, the fastest growing group is not the largest 1,000 companies. It's not the largest 1,000 companies, it's the second decile, right? So companies who are growing the fastest in India are those with PAT between 50 crores to 500 crores. That's the sweet spot in India. You have to be above 50 to break out of the challenges that the bureaucracy and expensive land and high working capital cost poses. You have to be above 50 to have sort of escape velocity, and below 500, because below 500 you're not so large that diseconomies of scale are kicking in and bureaucracy is kicking in. 50 to 500 consistently, whether it's listed, unlisted, I see is where the fastest growing companies in India. These are the disruptors. Often they're using the internet, often they're using AI, they're using apps, they've got lean business models with very little physical infrastructure. They've got high intellectual property, high brand power, high social media marketing skills. And that's where I think there's a lot of, that's a very exciting space. Companies which are 10, 15 years old, 50 to 500 crores PAT, I think lots of growth to be had there.
And they're typically ancillaries or they're standalones?
So it can be standalone. So for example, I'll give you an example. So Rainbow Hospitals was created 20 years ago. It's become the largest gynac and pediatric chain in the country, right? They have, I think, 18 hospitals, 4,000, 5,000 beds, largely South India, one hospital in Pune, two in Delhi, right? And they focus on working women. Working women are saying, we don't want to have our children in a super specialty hospital. We want it in a nice gynac and pediatrician oriented hospital, and they charge for that. I think Rainbow typical childbirth is 70,000-80,000 rupees, but working women are saying, I'm happy to pay that, right? I'm making money for myself. So Rainbow was born in 2008. A doctor actually migrated from the UK back to India, set it up. It's owned 75% by the doctors themselves, 25% by people like us. And these sorts of business models, right? Run by professionals, run by technocrats often, focusing on niche markets with a clearly differentiated proposition, are doing well in many different sectors.
Thanks.
Can I shout out the question?
Go on, sir, go on.
Yeah, I think you.
Thank you, Roopen. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, so I had two questions. The first one was, given that US and India are perfectly uncorrelated, I was wondering whether the Trump tariff is actually a good thing for the portfolio construction.
Yeah, so just to be clear, US and India are almost perfectly correlated. The reason I use the word almost is when you have global exigencies like COVID or the great financial crash, then both suffer. But barring those exigencies, theirs and our fate is unlinked to each other. And you're right, it's a very interesting point you make, because when we signed the FTA, when we signed the FTA, I believe it's a when, not if. When we sign the free trade agreement with America, the two economies will get linked, but I suspect they'll get linked at terms which favor them rather than us. I don't think 50 is sustainable. I think we'll probably come down to something like 20. My hope is that China will be 30, will be 20, and that will give us some way to sell our stuff, our auto parts and our gems and jewelry and our textiles into America. But for them, we are less than 2%. So America, just by the way, one interesting aspect, imports are only 10% of American GDP. Indian imports are less than 0.5%, less than even 0.3% of American GDP. So our imports are simply not meaningful in the context of the economy. Even for us, because we are not very competitive globally, exports to America are only 2% of GDP. If the FTA is a tremendous success, 2 might become 3. But by and large, the two economies will orbit different centers of gravity for the rest of your and my careers.
Yeah, and the second one was regarding private markets in the US. So your Gift City construct, does it also give people...
That's not yet allowed. It's a good question. Okay. It's not yet allowed.
Sir, your views on cryptocurrency?
It's a good idea, right? But I'll tell you why it's a good idea, and at the moment it's a little bit more, not much more than that. It's much like religion, right? It's been around for a long time, right? We all want the world to live in harmony, but all of us know what happens when religious fervor runs amok. Everybody believes their God is better, right? In crypto, the challenge is exactly that it's a great idea that government will have nothing to do with the currency and will have a centralized ledger. But what it opens up is a very obvious door for opportunists to come and fleece people and say, this is the next cryptocurrency. The next thing you know, again and again it happens. The guy runs with the money. Those who want to do it, I would say just stick to Bitcoin, right? Don't be more adventurous than that. Bitcoin seems to be stable. It seems to be less prone to abuses of trust. And if you're seeking diversification, then one should be enough. You don't need to build a basket. Avoid the cryptos which advertise heavily, because there's an obvious challenge there. If you're advertising heavily, somebody's going to pay for that advertisement. No. And most likely it's going to be you and me who sees an advertisement and invests. Bitcoin doesn't advertise so much, and it seems to be the one currency that you can trust that will be around without fleecing people and running for cover.
Any other question? What about your AI part? AI, you spoke about the AI piece. I'm going to ask you this. We've had multiple discussions on this. So what the Americans really progress at is the savings and investment rates significantly higher. So therefore they're able to actually put marketing dollars behind proper R&D, which is foundational tech building, which India is still nowhere close to building foundational tech, right? So even the companies that we look at the VC stage or the PE stage that we work on in India, it's all applications on the foundational tech. Right, it's not the foundational tech at all. We're not looking at that stage where we're trying to create a product that works out to be proper value of that. So, any thoughts on the listed side? Because the listed players aren't really going to spend on foundational tech either, even in India.
Yeah, so I think Karan makes a good point, right? So a lot of people in our country, we love to breastbeat in India, right? We love to breastbeat saying, "Dekho boss, we don't create new original molecules, we don't create AI." What we don't realize is the colossal sums of money required for this, right? You need to spend tens of billions of dollars to create an AI platform, right? More like $20-30 billion. Very difficult to go to TCS and say, Mr. CEO of TCS, take this year's entire cash flow and stick it into AI. Because if it misfires, and even if it fires, it will take 5 years. Right? What will he tell his shareholders in those 5 years, right? Similarly, new molecule development. It takes decades and billions of dollars are spent to create an original molecule. The good news is we are now seeing the beginnings of this, right? Wokhard, I think, Wokhard has a stage 2 drug, right? It's still some way from becoming a proper drug, but stage 2 ho gaya hai. Glenmark as well, I think stage 2 ho gaya hai. We're seeing some promoters put in long-term commitments. It's hurting them because it takes 10 years for the results to show through. I think my career, we won't see that much in India by way of foundational technology in AI or original drug development, but I think my children's career will be there. Proof of this is China. China now creates more original drugs every year, way more than America does. American companies are now out-licensing Chinese drugs, right? Just mind-blowing, no? American companies are out-licensing Chinese drugs. China leads the world now in drug research, right? And it's all happened in the last 10, 15 years when the Chinese have plowed in large sums of money and the research is now bearing fruit. It will happen to us. We'll have to wait for another 10, 15 years for India to get there.
Just one more question on a separate note. If you're seeing this on the listed side, our oil import bill is about 200 billion as of last year. Viksit Bharat plan says energy consumption is going to go up by at least 2.5 times. So that would imply that our oil import bill at that point would be almost 500 billion. Now, while we can say we have 700 billion US dollar reserves, that's 1 year of getting wiped out on one oil shock. From the energy security point of view, forget about the climate piece. I mean, that can be jargon as well, right? But are you having discussions internally with larger listed guys? Because I'm personally having great conversations with Indian founders building out energy security pieces across the value chain. Are you seeing a focus on that in the larger players from energy security point of view?
I've heard plenty of discussions on this rare earth business, but on energy security, it's not preoccupied people's minds, largely current, because I think given that our GDP is 60% services, financial services, IT, media, that's not very energy intensive. So India's oil bill as a percentage of GDP has gone from being 12% a decade ago to 8 today. And I reckon it'll be more like 5 a decade hence, because the services piece is the part of the economy which grows. Manufacturing, as you know, is not really growing at the rate we want it to, right? So the natural structure of our economy will reduce the oil bill as a percentage of GDP. Now, are we still vulnerable to what Trump is doing to us? We probably will be, but that vulnerability, I think, will reduce a decade hence. Plus, from the looks of it, credible people like Tata are putting up 150, 200 gigawatts of renewable power. So is Adani. So is the government of India. So we seem to be all right on the power security front. But as we can see with the Trump example, right? And just this morning, the Americans cancelled their trip to India. They clearly will extract the maximum buck from us on this issue. We're vulnerable, but I think the vulnerability is reducing with time because of the structure of our economy.
Okay. So now I think all good things come to an end. We will close this session, but I think Saurabh will be around. So he can take questions and sign his books. It's an excellent book. I have read it. I recommend it to you. It gives you a lot of insight into the Indian economy and how it's growing. And as I had agreed deliberately, I didn't ask him any political questions. And so I think we will close the session here with a vote of thanks and a memento.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjea and Mr. Roy, for this excellent conversation. May I please request Mr. Partharanjan Das, our president, to give the token of appreciation. Mr. Saurabh Mukherjea. Another one for Mr. Roopen Roy, please. Thank you.